Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gaming My Whole Life. My name is George, and today we are discussing Days Gone 2 and that it equals Sony is desperate. These are my raw thoughts. Now, while a Days Gone 2 has not been officially confirmed, a Days Gone Remaster unexpectedly is in the works, will be coming out very shortly. You can upgrade to it for an extra $10 if you own the game, and it comes with a number of small minute features. I'm not really even here to talk about the fact that I think the Days Gone Remaster is pointless and is a desperate cash grab from Sony because they keep making a lot of mistakes lately. It is no secret that their games have not been hitting the mark and that Sony has unfortunately gone a bit political, have reprioritized what is important in the gaming industry, and has shown that they don't know what they're doing and they are losing out on a lot of money at the moment, despite the fact that the PlayStation 5 is selling very well. So their games aren't doing so good. Think of Concord, think of all that stuff. Now, today's video is not talking about the fact Sony's gone woke and this and that. That is not today's conversation. While it is part of it, while Sony gone woke is obviously a problem because they have deprioritized their games, I want to talk about the broader picture as to why I don't trust Sony with a Days Gone 2 and why I think a Days Gone 2 may actually be a mistake. And please keep in mind, I'm actually a big fan of the original Days Gone. I absolutely love that game. Funny story, well, no more coincidence, I'm actually replaying Days Gone 2 as we speak. That is what I'm using my PlayStation 5 console for. So my PlayStation 5 is always being used to play the PlayStation 4 games because that's when Sony was still cool. And Days Gone is the game I'm playing right now as we speak. So it's fresh in my memory, my respect for it. It is a fantastic game. But we're going to have a bit of a deep conversation here, right? And talk about the fact that I don't think Sony has the tools or the talent currently in order to make a good Days Gone 2. And sometimes when it comes to movies, when it comes to games, if you're not going to respect the original source and what made the original great, sometimes it's better not to bring out that sequel and just diminish the overall quality of the brand as a whole. So Days Gone, for those of you who are maybe not too familiar with it, it is that zombie game. It is that AAA budget looking game that came out from Sony and Ben Studio, the original team that was behind the Siphon Filter series. Fun fact, you can actually ride a Siphon Filter themed bike in Days Gone, and that's currently the skin that I use on my bike. Anyway, they brought out that game, and this game, the first game, was filled with so much unexpected controversy for the silliest of reasons and has since developed a bit of a cult following where it has sold a minimum of at least 8 million copies, which is big numbers, right? $8 million. This is hardly a failure of a game. 8 million is gangbuster numbers, and that's minimum. Maybe it's even 9 or 10 million at the moment, but at least $8 million, 8 million copies sold for a first party Sony game. Not too bad. The actual game itself is a lot of fun. Zombies everywhere. You ride around on a bike, you need to get petrol to put in the bike, you can run out of fuel, you're smashing the zombies. It's a lot of fun. I'm not going to go over the game mechanics. This is not a Days Gone review. But let's go over a little bit of the controversy just to refresh your memory, and this does all play a part as to why I don't trust Sony with Days Gone 2, because Days Gone itself represents everything that the current Western Sony is against, whether you like woke, whether you don't. The point is, Sony would actually hate a Days Gone 2, and if they did it, it would literally be a cash grab and a disrespectful one. So what's the controversy around Days Gone? The first one. Why did Sony immediately remove themselves from wanting anything to do from their own game? It was the weirdest thing, even before I even knew what the word woke meant, even before I knew all this political stuff, mumbo jumbo, right? Even before all of that, Days Gone was a brand new IP by Ben Studio. As I said, they made the Siphon Filter games. So I was curious. The reviews came out and the reviews weren't too positive, right? And when it's a brand new IP, you're uncertain, and unfortunately we all live with budgets and we need to be careful with our money. Sometimes we take the words of reviewers. At least back then we were still sometimes taking their words. It isn't like 2025 where you just know by default you're probably going to disagree with anything a reviewer has to say anyway and you should go and buy the games. We weren't like that just quite yet with Days Gone. So sadly, they made it sound like a pretty uninspired, boring game. They said the characters were boring, uninspired. It was just another zombie game. Yeah, there's a lot of them, but now you have a motorbike that was it. They hardly sold it. And then with time, Days Gone would go like on a sale or something, or word of mouth and so forth. And what most of us did, and myself included, is we got Days Gone on a sale. We're like, look, I was pretty curious. I'm going to have low expectations for this, but I don't know, there was just something about it. It looked cool. And then we got the Days Gone game, and then we started playing it, and we were all just shocked. We're like, hang on, hold up. This game that the moment it sold, Sony didn't talk about, Sony didn't promote, there was barely any promotion. Sony wanted nothing to do with this game. It was really confusing. Because you all know, when a first-party Nintendo game comes out, when a first-party Microsoft game comes out, and especially when a first-party studio Sony PlayStation game came out during the PlayStation 4 era, so this is the peak of everyone loves Sony, right? That game came out, and then Sony wouldn't say a word about it, and it was the weirdest thing, because you all know when The Last of Us 2 came out, right? Love or hate that game, the world knew when The Last of Us 2 came out. The world knew when Spider-Man came out and God of War, because it is Sony's job and responsibility for a game that they made and put all this money into to heavily promote it and give it the best shot possible. And yet when Days Gone came out, they were silent, and it was really weird. It was almost like they were ashamed of it the second it came out. It's like, why? Was there anything controversial about this game? Actually, no. The reaction to the original Days Gone was controversial, but the actual game itself wasn't controversial at all. It's just a fun game for many different reasons, which I'm not going to go over here, because as I said, this is not a review, and I don't want to bore people who have already played the game and love it. But they didn't like the game because it starred two white men. And while now in 2025 you hear that, two white men leading a game, oh my goodness, eyes rolling at the back of their heads. Yes, we all know what that means now. We know what that meant now, but when Days Gone first came out, and then they first started saying this stuff, and they even said it in the reviews, it was really confusing. I hadn't quite caught up. I remember reading reviews, and they'll be like, yeah, this game's so boring, I don't like this, I don't like that. And they're like, it's just another two white guys. And I remember reading that specifically. I'm like, you play as two white characters. And I'm like, hang on. Since when has that been a problem? It generally confused me at the time. I'm like, why did you even mention their skin color? I've never seen anyone say, you're just playing as two white guys. And I've also never heard anyone say, you're just playing as black characters. Like, skin color was never something that was ever mentioned in a review before. So it really caught me off guard. However, that slight red flag aside, the way they talked about the game, the majority of the reviews, just sounds pretty boring. It sounds like a game you wait for a sale and then maybe try it out. And I remember even one chick, I have no idea who she was, but I remember this really stood out even back then, where she proudly admitted the fact that she was meant to review the game, and she played like 1 or 2 hours or something, and she said, I got so bored that I just refused to play it anymore and I'm not doing a review. Or I think she forced out a review anyway, while openly admitting to the fact that she barely played the game. And I was like, what is going on with this? Anyway, I ignored it. I'm not a rich man. I can't challenge every single negative review of a game I'm potentially interested in and go buy it anyway. Unfortunately, we have to pick and choose our battles. And it's like, all right, I have $100. I can afford to buy this game this month, or this game every 6 months, or whatever your budget is. Anyway, later on, we got the game. We played it. And it was phenomenal. The graphics are phenomenal. It is gorgeous to this day. It looks so fantastic. The gameplay, the story, the characters, the tone is so good. It really sets the theme. It really makes you take the world seriously. The game mechanics are fun. The graphics looks absolutely phenomenal. And if you use the photo mode as well, you can get even gorgeous shots. It's a great looking game, right? It's a great looking game. And with time, word of mouth went about. Reviews from YouTubers went out where we all convinced each other one by one, hey, go try Days Gone, go try Days Gone, go try Days Gone. And that's why it has a cult following now. It's why fans absolutely love the game, and it's why with time it slowly got the 8 million copies that it sold. As I said, if it has not gone up even more, is because this was a slow grower, because most of us were deterred to try this game, and then word of mouth went around, and then we tried it anyway, and we fell in love with it. So with that being said, there's a Days Gone remaster that's come out. This is Sony just trying to get a bit of extra money. I think the remaster is absolutely pointless. You don't remaster games that came out a single generation ago and still look phenomenal. Can you add some visual improvements in this and that? Yes, that should be considered a free update, not something you charge players extra money for. It's like when they remastered The Last of Us 2. Sony is remastering everything from last generation. Does it and can it look better? Yes. Is it worth the title of remaster? No, that is just milking players because they don't know how to make good games anymore. That is very sad. You know what is an actual really good remaster? The Soul Reaver remaster. Soul Reaver 1 and 2, they remastered PlayStation 1 and 2 games. Fantastic. The Tomb Raider 4 to 6 remasters just came out. That looks fantastic, right? They're actually old enough to do visual upgrades that it is worthy of the title remaster. The Thing remastered came out. Star Wars Jedi Power Battles, more of an HD port, but it's probably a bad example of like a really good remaster. That's just a fun game we haven't had access to. But remastering Days Gone, a game that Sony themselves have tried so hard to distance themselves from, because you know what modern Sony is? Modern Sony in the Western globe, you have to remember that Sony is broken up into two pieces. You have the Japanese Sony and you have the Western, American, California, wherever they are, Sony, with Naughty Dog and the like, right? That side of Sony hates Days Gone because, as the reviewers used to say, it's just two white dudes. Did you have a look at, that galactic new game coming from Naughty Dog, the shaved lesbian Asian whatever, the funky looking chick, right? We all know that that's what the Western Sony wants to look at. Days Gone is obviously the opposite of that. Days Gone, St. Vincent Paul. He is a Christian man. He gets married in a church. He's attracted to his wife. He's not gay. He represents normality, right? He represents everything that Sony is not interested in. So if they dipped into Days Gone 2, I don't think the team themselves, even Ben's studio, I don't think even they're up to the task. Because let me tell you about a little controversy, right? This isn't blowing things out of the water. This is actually really important. The actual game director of Days Gone, right? We all know the position of the game director in video game development. What they say goes. Their hand is guiding everything. It's really important. You have a good game director, the game goes good. You have a bad game director, well then the game sucks. The game director of Days Gone is actually no longer part of Ben's studio. So that is itself is a huge red flag. The original person pushing his vision is no longer part of Ben's studio. He left and he has confirmed everything that I said at the start. He and me and fans and the like have always suspected that Days Gone was reviewed negatively because of the woke movement, which was just starting back then, and they reviewed it unfavorably. He himself, the game director of Days Gone himself, the legend, right? Even if it's just the one game, I consider him a legend because I just love Days Gone. He himself has come out publicly on Twitter and now X. He's come out publicly and said, hey, yes, they reviewed our game poorly that we worked so hard on because of the fact that it was two white dudes, right? He absolutely called it as it is. And the thing about this isn't just that he confirms what we could all see with our eyes. What is upsetting and why I don't trust the remainder of Ben's studio, so they have a lot of, trust to earn back, is when he publicly made this comment, right? He's like, I've left Ben's studio and Days Gone didn't get the love and respect it deserved. And if Sony actually backed it, it would have done a lot better. And I highly believe that, right? I highly believe that it's done so well with basically just word of mouth at this stage. But what happened is, so he posted this publicly on X, Twitter at the time, on his own private account. And then Ben Studio, the official Ben Studio account, so the team that he was leading, their official social media, whatever, responded to his comment, basically saying, hey, we disagree with everything this guy has to say. He does not represent us. Now, think about how much of a bad red flag that is, right? His only crime was to say, hey, the game that you, me, and the whole team worked on and we slaved years away at, and we managed to produce fantastic graphics and gameplay with a much smaller budget compared to Sony's typical games, right? It was a much smaller budget. It was like 60, 80 million, something like that. It's below, right? His only crime was him saying, hey, this game deserved more. And the team should have backed that up. And instead, at least the clown who runs the social media, they responded saying, hey, we want nothing to do with him. He's wrong. He does not represent us. So the fact that Sony turned their back on this game as soon as it launched, the fact that Sony is okay with Ben Studio publicly outing the original game director and saying, no, we don't support his vision, we don't support anything he said, that is a huge problem. So if these people, the people who would rather have a chick with a shaved head, right, to virtue signal. No one does that because they think it looks cool. They know the divide they cause. They know the divide they cause with The Last of Us Part 2. Let's not pretend we don't know who Naughty Dog has now become. They are no longer the fabulous team that brought us, Crash Bandicoot and so forth. Like that team is gone. They have the technical brilliance. They bring out fantastic looking visuals and the animations and this and that. But they would rather virtual signal a game into its own grave before they focus on making an actual great game first, unfortunately. And I've heard behind the scenes, I'm not going to pretend this is me, this is just other YouTubers, but I've heard other YouTubers talk about the fact that apparently behind the scenes, Naughty Dog tried to push down the efforts of Ben's studio because Ben's studio was achieving such fantastic results with only a fraction of the budget that Naughty Dog requires. Because Naughty Dog, when they work on a game, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a huge investment with an obscene amount of development time. Whereas Days Gone came out with less time, less budget, and still looked almost just as impressive. Which says a lot. It might even suggest that in the right hand, Ben Studios can one day produce things that look even better than Naughty Dog, which is a big deal because Naughty Dog, frankly, they're probably known as the world's most talented studios as far as pushing out the most graphically impressive games and so forth. The Last of Us Part 2, I'm not a fan of it, but visually it was obviously phenomenal. But circling back to Days Gone 2, the reason why I think it will be a bad idea to have it is Days Gone, the first one, was about two things. It was about the stellar gameplay, and it was about the story and the world and the personality of the players. One thing that really surprised me with Days Gone was the fact that the main characters, the way they interacted with each other, the way they talked to each other, it has the most realistic, relatable dialogue I have ever experienced in a video game. It isn't that the cutscenes are so phenomenal and everything they say is so breathtaking and you think of it like a movie. It's the fact that when you see the characters talk to each other, not side quest givers, like actual cutscenes, the main character and so forth, when you talk to people of importance, the way they talk to each other, it doesn't feel like a script. It doesn't feel like people are playing out a role. It feels like how you and me in today's world would actually talk to each other. It was very humbled. It was very realistic. And so whenever those cutscenes cut out, whenever you had a chance to put the controller down and listen, you did. It was fantastic. And it did things very maturely and so forth, right? It handled the harder topics. It handled the lighter things. It was just done really well. So in order to do a successful Days Gone 2, you're going to need to get two things down, right? One, the gameplay. That's a given. I would say just mimic what you've already done. Add some to it. Make the graphics better, whatever. The part where I think current day Ben Studio and especially Modern Western Sony would butcher a Days Gone 2 is I think they would destroy the story. And the story and the world of Days Gone is equally just as important as the first, as gameplay, right? It's very important. If they butchered the story of Days Gone 2, which I think there's a high chance they would destroy Days Gone. The characters, their beliefs. See, Days Gone isn't about a bunch of people who are perfect and loving and looking out for one another and leading by example. Days Gone is filled with imperfect individuals trying to do their best. Some are outright evil, some just make mistakes, and others, like the main characters, are just trying to figure it out as they go. They make mistakes, they try to learn. There is a lot of grey area. And if you've been paying attention to Modern Western Sony, they don't understand depth, grey area, this and that. All they know how to do is virtual signal. And again, this isn't just Sony's work so we can't trust them. It's their talent no longer understands depth. They don't understand depth. I don't trust them with them choosing what the main character has to say. I think they would butcher that. I think they would get rid of any interest in plot twists. I think they would have everything so grayed out and boring where it's very obvious who the bad person is, who the good person is. I think the decisions would be really predictable and so forth. There's this constant unease in Days Gone where everyone's trying to do their best and anyone can die in any moment, and it's a very serious feeling. But also the characters stay true to themselves. The men act like men and they're not shamed for it, as in modern world, day politics, blah 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 blah. that wouldn't stand. That wouldn't stand. You can't have guys act like guys. In Days Gone 1, there is a scene, and I kid you not, there was even articles written about it, and it's so embarrassing that this even happened. Just shows how pathetic how some journalists are. But there was a scene that lasts for literally like 3 seconds, right? 3 seconds, the main guy, he's talking with his girl, he marries her, you know, he loves her. This is a big thing about him and his wife and so forth, right? He loves her. And sometimes you get a bit of a flashback, you know, to show them interacting with each other before the zombies took over, you know, in a slice of normalcy, so to speak. And, you know, in one point, she's in front of him and she bent over for a second and he took a peek. He took a peek at her butt. It wasn't this gross, slow-mo, zoom in, exaggerated, really sexualized, whatever. It's not. His girl bent over. He had a peek. He had a slight smirk on his face. And keep in mind, she didn't even bend over with the skirt or anything like that. She was just wearing jeans or pants or something. She bent over for a second. He had a peek. He had a smile. And the story moved on, right? Like it was over just like that. And frankly, that actually portrays a realistic relationship. Anyone in a relationship, married, girlfriend, whatever, if you're not looking at her butt, she thinks something's wrong. That's just something we do with each other. We're just continuously validating each other. We're continuously boosting each other's self-esteem. We're continuously reminding each other, hey, I think you're a hottie. That is very normal and so forth. And yet, that slight bit in Days Gone, that made articles and stuff and people talking about it and use it as an example of how the game is problematic. And oh my goodness, something as small and dumb as that became a talking point, which is ridiculous. That is not something to talk about, right? So we have silly things like that. On a technical side, right? The original team, from what I know, I don't know if people have been fired or if people have moved on, but technically Days Gone 1 was brilliant. So if the same people were there for a Days Gone 2, I think technically it would look good. It would look good. But I think characters like Boozer, he is such a tough guy. He's tough, he's violent, he's psychotic, he's loyal to a T. He's like a dog. He's like a loyal dog. And you just love him, right? You love so many of these characters. I do not believe for a second that without the original game director, and of course the way Sony prioritizes the wrong things these days, Western Sony, not Sony Japan, but the way they prioritize the wrong things, I think they would butcher the main character. I think they would butcher Boozer, and they would even butcher the women as well. See, the thing is, with Days Gone 1, right, this is actually a really funny, a wonderful example, right? Days Gone 1, technically, has such good diversity and representation. And I'm not even kidding you. I'm not even kidding you. But of course, it was just part of the game. It wasn't virtual signaling or whatever. You have very tough women and interesting characters in this game. You have white women, you have black women. You even have, right? This is how smart Days Gone was. And they didn't use people as tokens. They didn't have characters as tokens to tick boxes. And that's probably why they weren't liked. Inside of the first Days Gone game, she's just a side character, but she appears a number of times. There is a girl who, there's clearly something wrong with her, right? She's autistic, there's something there. She doesn't quite see the world for what it is, and so she's a potential danger to herself. Unfortunately, she was being looked after by her parents, but the zombies obviously ate her parents, or at the very least, they disappeared. Whatever. They're gone. So you keep bumping into this girl, you save her, she disappears, she runs off, you repeat it a few times, she joins a cult, a whole bunch of different things happen, right? And you see this autistic girl, you know, evolve as a character and so forth. And she would absolutely fall under the banner of, you know, like representation and disabled people and this and that, the sort of things that you'd watch the Game Awards and, you know, Ben Studios should get an award for that sort of thing. However, this game doesn't treat characters like her as a token. She's just an interesting character who just happens to be a woman and she just happens to be autistic or whatever it is she is, right? There are so many examples of this game where you have strong women and this and that. You have everything in this game, but the game focused on being a game first, and that seems to have rubbed Sony themselves the wrong way. So the fact that Sony released this game with the smallest amount of marketing I have ever seen it was quite clear that Sony regretted this game before they even launched it. And that is so unfair to the developers and the original game director that put so much effort into the game that they were ashamed of it before it came out. even though they technically didn't do anything wrong. They promised a fantastic game. They delivered a fantastic game, but because it wasn't virtual signaling in the social way that Sony Western had decided at that time, it was suddenly problematic. So they launched it, they gave it no advertising, it's like almost dead in the waters, apart from the handful of people who were brave enough and smart enough to support it originally. Most of us sadly didn't. But I know some of you in the comment section, you supported it straight away, and good for you, you knew. I fell for it, I admit that, and that's why I try to redeem myself every chance I get. The game did good, the game is good, and a Days Gone 2 under the right hands would be fantastic, and I would love to see their world expanded. However, doing successful sequels is a lot more complicated than people realize if the story in the game and its world is important, right? If this was just a game that was purely 100% on gameplay, what happens in the story and the characters doesn't matter at all, then yeah, I think they can make a functional, zombie survival game, which would be fun. You go around your motorbike, shoot everyone. I'm sure they can replicate what has already been done and just make it smoother if possible. But I have no reason to believe that the interactions between NPCs and characters in the actual story and the respect of the world that they're in, I have no reason to believe that they would do that justice, and that would be so damaging, because Days Gone is the perfect merger of brilliant gameplay with satisfying story and characters. And you can't bring out a Days Gone 2 just because Sony is desperate for money right now, just because Spider-Man 2 did not sell as much as they wanted, just because The Last of Us 2 did not sell as much as they wanted. And I guarantee the shaved Asian chick, the Galactica or whatever, that will not sell well either. And of course that hurts Sony. Bringing out a Days Gone 2 and taking advantage of the fans that have slowly accumulated over the years, despite them turning their back out of nowhere, and then having the nerve to release a Days Gone Remastered just so then they can get some extra easy money, that rubs me the wrong way. I don't think that would be respectful to a Days Gone 2 in the slightest. If the original developer came back and Sony made a public apology, right, and they somehow assured us that, hey, we're going to do things right, like a complete turnaround. But at the moment, I have no trust for these people. I think Days Gone was lucky. It made it just in time. It started development and so forth right before the cultural shift happened, right before the propaganda really started to gain steam, right before they started destroying game studios and game franchises and so forth. And Days Gone managed to get out the door just in time before everything went downhill, right before everything went downhill. So I don't trust the current Sony to do it. I don't trust the story writers. If a Days Gone 2 is to come out, I will absolutely research who is writing the story, who is in charge of the characters, who is in charge of the world, and sadly, what is their views on politics. And by what is their views on politics, I mean, do they care about politics? See, I'm not about put the right type of politics or put my politics. I'm about don't have that shite in games. The game goes first. If the game's a political world, cool. But the world of Days Gone has been established. The brutality of the players have been established. And the hordes and this and that, that's all cool. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if this remaster is just yet another attempt for Sony to remaster yet another game that has no business being remastered. First one is fine. It runs amazing on my PlayStation 5. PC version got even further graphical upgrades and so forth. Like, there's really no reason to buy this from scratch if you don't already have it already. If you want to pay the $10 to get the, the extra horde mode and so forth and the other stuff, that's up to you. I'm not going to shame you for that. I'm just saying, Days Gone Remastered, that's a cash grab as far as I'm concerned. A Days Gone 2 equals Sony is desperate, as I put in the title of my thumbnail. I just don't see them doing good with this. I don't trust them, and trust is everything when it comes to games. It really is. There's a reason why, yes, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to bring up Nintendo again. There's a reason why the Switch 2 will sell out something stupid, why it will be a phenomenal success, because the amount of trust that Nintendo has gotten from fans over decades of effort, resisting the temptation to have multiple paid versions of the same game, resisting the temptation of having microtransactions inside of every single one of their games. They've resisted all of that, right? And with that, the loyalty has stuck with them. So then people like me know, hey, when the Switch 2 comes out, even though it will be cheap, it will be weaker than the Xbox, it will be weaker than the PlayStation. I know Nintendo is going to continue trying their best to give me the best games possible. They're not going to try virtual signal in the middle of their games. They're going to just try to give us the best game possible. Whether they succeed or not, that's up to Nintendo and the amount of effort they're willing to put in. But when you get the next Zelda game, that's going to be the best Zelda game that the current Nintendo team can do. When you get the next Mario Kart, that's going to be their best one. They're not going to have Mario Kart drivers that are trans for some reason or some rubbish like that. It all matters, it all adds up, and it all shows the priority, because Nintendo still remembers that games sell consoles and that games are everything. It is ridiculous that in the gaming industry, certain publishers, certain mega corporations have forgotten that the only way to have a successful console and to have a successful amount of software sales, so in other words, enough copies of your game sold, is for the game to be good. And no matter how much you twist it, no matter how much you bend things, no matter how much you lie to yourself, and no matter how much of an echo chamber you're in, if your games aren't selling, that's a problem. And if that's not a problem now, it will be a problem later on. And burning bridges by the new people that work in these companies is the worst thing possible, right? Sony has been around since forever. I've had the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I might skip the PlayStation 6 if Sony doesn't radically change their priorities. Losing people like me and losing others is a big deal. See, when you look after your target audience, when you look after fans and especially gamers, when you look after us, that means you guarantee success for anything you do in the future. If Days Gone came out with the same amount of promotions as all of Sony's other IPs, if Sony backed Days Gone, gave it the respect, stood by it and so forth, then a Days Gone 2 would be a no-brainer. Then a video like this wouldn't exist. Then the only thing that would exist would be excitement and how can we expand things further, instead of, hang on, they let the game director walk away, then they publicly outed him, stabbed him in the back online. You understand? We're having conversations that otherwise we wouldn't. Whereas with Nintendo, right? If we're talking about Nintendo again, before the next Mario Kart game comes out, you see any drama online about that? See any drama online for the next Mario game? Actually, do you see any drama online for any game they release ever? No, because Nintendo isn't interested in that stuff. They just release good games. They're not on X making fun of fans, calling people ists and that's and phobics and so forth. They're just trying to release good games. The sooner Sony does that, the sooner a sequel like this can be successful. And my only concern is there is a subset of gamers who, when they're a fan of something, they will buy it no matter what, as long as they see a number 2. Like, there is dead set. It's like the Super Pokemon fans, right? We know in recent years that a lot of broken Pokemon games have come out. They've expanded as far as the gameplay goes, and it's more open world now, and that's cool. But the games have launched in a horrific state. We know there's a certain amount of people that, as long as the name Pokemon is there, they will buy a game, even if it looks like a Nintendo 64 game in terms of graphics. Even if it's the most broken game in history, they will buy it. And this exists with every group of fans, and that would exist for Days Gone as well. See, if a Days Gone 2 comes out, you need to pay attention, you need to see if it's good, and you need to see if it's worth your money. Just having the number 2 should not automatically mean you go out and buy it, right? You love the first Days Gone game for different reasons. Make sure that those same reasons exist in Days Gone 2. Don't let them manipulate you. Just because you see the name, you think it's going to be good, let them prove that to you. Let them prove that to you. And, frankly, if you haven't already, go play Days Gone 1. The game is phenomenal. It is my favorite game on the PlayStation 4 outright. It's a fantastic game. I love it. I love the gameplay. I love the mechanics. The graphics are gorgeous. And I'm not even a fan of motorbikes and so forth, and yet I love the motorbike system in Days Gone. I think it's so cool. I love it that you have to pay attention to petrol, that it matters. I love how realistic it is. Like, if I'm going down a hill, I take my foot off the accelerator or the rev or whatever you call it, right? I let it roll because it literally saves you petrol if you let yourself roll. There's all these little tricks. It's so cool. It's such a great game. It really is. And the actual mechanics are satisfying, and I'll just leave it there. Anyways, let me know down below if you're a fan of Days Gone, and if you feel it, it really deserves a lot more respect than it got. And again, for the people not paying attention in the back, and yet somehow you've lasted this long, I can't stress enough, this isn't as simple as Sony is woke, so they can't do a Days Gone 2. The more simple explanation is, if Sony doesn't understand what made the first Days Gone good, then it obviously makes sense that they can't replicate that and enhance that with the sequel. Politics or not, if you don't understand what made the original great, you're not going to do a good sequel. And sometimes it's better to just leave it alone. I would love a Days Gone 2, but only if it's worthy of its own existence. Otherwise, I'm happy to keep replaying Days Gone. Anyways, with that being said, God bless you all, take care, and I'll see you for the next video.